Welcome to another episode review from Everfree Radio. My name is Final Draft. I'm here today with...
Crescendo.
Nash.
Hey, I'm Tsyolin.
Hey, Tsyolin. I think I've heard of you somewhere before. You're like a musician or something, right?
Wait, really?
Yeah, I think you do like, electronic stuff?
Maybe. I don't know.
I thought he did that dub trot stuff.
No, he does pony beat. And you know what?
Oh,
we just need to be glad that he's not, AJ the engineer or some crap. You never know.
Oh, I don't like that guy. He's a jerk.
He's a real jerk. So today we're going to review a Canterlot wedding, the big two-parter season finale for season 2, an over-the-top extravaganza of awesome, and man, there's a lot to review in this. So we're bringing in all the big guns, and we're going to tackle both parts all in one large review. So I wanted to start off by starting with the opening scene, which is where we see all of the main six sitting around having a picnic. There have been a lot of picnics this year, haven't there?
Yeah, I suppose they have, but can you blame them with the weather that the Pegasi are obviously giving them?
I guess not. They're sitting around, and Spike comes huffing and puffing up with a bit of news. Apparently there is a major wedding happening in Canterlot. Dun dun dun. Who didn't see that coming?
Well, it's kind of obvious from the title.
That and the fact we've been subjected to hundreds of trailers that almost gave away the episode.
And I was going to say, too, this episode especially was really hyped up. We all knew what it was going to be about months ago.
Though, there were some parts that we didn't foresee, of course, but we'll get to them later.
Indeed we will. Well, and so clearly this is a wedding episode, and the first letter that Spike produces via Belch is the individual instructions for each of the ponies as to what they're going to be doing. Naturally, Pinkie Pie is in charge of the party, Rarity's in charge of the dresses, Applejack is in charge of the food, and then he produces another letter, which he should have read first, which tells Twilight that it is actually her previously unknown brother, Shining Armor, who's getting married to Princess Miyamori Cadenza.
Twilight's brother, whom she's apparently very close with, despite the fact in 2 years we've never seen or heard of him.
It seems whenever they have a picnic, something goes wrong and Twilight ends up being a little upset, whether it be from all the way back from Lesson 0 or in this episode.
Do you think that's because she's outside of her library for too long?
Well, that's a good observation, maybe.
Those books,
She's a bookworm.
they're comforting.
I think they just shouldn't have picnics.
It's probably safer if they didn't, huh? Well, and so Twilight is very upset because she only found out about this wedding via the letter instead of directly from her beloved, previously unknown brother, and breaks into the first of the musical interludes, a song about her and her brother, which I found to be, relatively adorable, especially because it contained Philly Twilight scenes, and, well, who can argue with those?
Yeah, Philly Twilight is best Philly.
And I quite like the song, too. It had a nice guitar rhythm. I always tend to like those kinds of guitar rhythms, especially because I'm more into acoustics, and it was really good. I liked it.
Yeah, I enjoyed it, too. It gave kind of a nice background to Twilight's relationship with her brother, which I think he was an invention for this episode. But in terms of, I don't know if you would call this retconning or whatever, it was nice to kind of see that dynamic between them.
Even though he was just introduced in this episode, they already were able to establish a nice little backstory about him.
Well, and I also enjoyed Twilight's little talking sandwich scene. Yeah, where she has the sandwich and does the voice. It reminded me a lot of the first episode of the entire series where she's doing that voice. That kind of snarkiness. There hasn't been enough of that this season.
Yeah, I just love that when Twilight's being all sarcastic. I just love the that voice, and it was one of the things that got me hooked on the show when I saw that in the pilot, so that was definitely welcome.
Well, and Crescendo, I think maybe you were saying the same thing a lot of us were saying right after Twilight said it, when she was talking about Princess Cadence, aka Cadenza, which is who in the hoof is she?
Yep.
Oh, the pun. They never end.
Oh, yes. The other element of that scene that I really enjoyed was when Rarity just starts swooning again, because of course it's a Canterlot wedding and she gets to be the center of all the elites again. And Twilight even comes prepared with a pillow.
Well, where was the drama couch?
Yeah, where's where's the fainting couch? You know, I was expecting that.
Well, she uses it so much it must have been at the cleaners.
But of course, how typical of Rarity to be the drama queen. We know she's the drama queen by now. Is to be expected.
We love her for it, though. We love her for it. Well, okay, so after our song and after our introduction to the situation at hand that, shock of shocks, Twilight's brother is getting married to Princess Cadence, aka Cadenza, we see them on a train on their way to Canterlot. Once again, the train makes an appearance.
Now, one delightful little pun I noticed in this sequence was Applejack goes up to Twilight and asks, "Why the long face?"
Horse pun.
Yeah.
It seems like train is just the only way to get to Canterlot. You'd suspect there'd be another way to get there, but I
Well,
guess not.
there are the flying chariots that we see in a few episodes, especially the ones that take Princess Celestia around, but generally they're for royal use
Well,
only.
yeah.
Well, and I think that as we find out pretty soon, those guards may have been employed elsewhere. But either way, I like how Spike mentions he's going to throw a bachelor party and then doesn't know what one is.
Yeah, how does that work? A bachelor party for ponies? What would that involve? It boggles the mind.
If I had to guess, Nash, and I have to make this joke, I think that the punch would be spiked.
Oh, you. Cue Pinkie Pie rim shot.
Well, cue Pinkie Pie sneezing out confetti. I love that too.
Yeah, you know, you can't even question it anymore. You could just say like, oh yeah, that's our Pinkie Pie, and just leave it be.
Well, I like how the guards kind of look a little surprised, and then they're fine with it.
It's Pinkie Pie. We all know her physics breaking by now.
Yep.
Word has spread amongst the guard as well.
Well, we see that force field as they get into town. And, you know, when I was first watching it, I was kind of confused by that, which I think was the point of it. I thought that was kind of interesting that they introduced that. And then there's a significant amount of time between when you see the force field and when it's finally explained.
I do like, though, that they have the continuity of having the force field right from the beginning. Because the first shot we see of Canterlot, you see this purple bubble, and you're like, what the hey is that?
Who in the hoof?
Exactly.
Yeah, it's just those little details that create continuity. There's just extra touches. They could have just skipped it, but they don't. It's just maintaining a high quality.
That and the large number of guards there, and it makes you think, well, gee, I didn't think there were that many members of the Royal Guard. Jeez.
I guess most of them hide out in the library mostly. I
They
don't
just
know.
rounded up some random stallions from the street and like, hey, you want to be in the guard?
And that's how Twilight's brother became captain. Well, and Nash, you noticed that Shining Armor's VA is someone we've heard of before.
Yeah, it's the same voice actor as for Brayburn.
Hey there.
Indeed.
Welcome to Canterlot.
I didn't recognize the voice. There was a tweet about it a while back in, I think it was December, and I misremembered it as Big Mac, but I looked it up and it's actually Brayburn. I was thinking, like, I don't recognize this voice, so it was a completely different voice, but a voice actor we've heard before.
It's probably the Western accent that makes it sound.
I do like it when a voice actor can manipulate their voice to sound like two different characters. The best example I can think of would be within Pinkie Pie and Fluttershy. They sound so different.
Yep. Well, that's Andrea Libman's ability to switch between voices. I mean, she can just do it so quickly. I've always been impressed by that.
Me too.
Well, and so Shining Armor introduces who Princess Cadenza truly is, aka Twilight's old full sitter, Princess Cadence, who she knows from her childhood. And we get this incredibly adorable flashback.
The thing here is, why would a princess be a foal sitter? And who is her mother to make her a princess?
Yeah.
Because I'm pretty sure Celestia would say something if it were her daughter.
Yeah, you have to wonder, from the logical viewpoint, like, where does she come from? Suddenly, another winged unicorn. It is kind of odd.
It comes out of nowhere because there was a lot of, especially fan had built up about how there were only 2 alicorns left. Then this character comes along and it just makes you wonder, well, where did she come from?
Well, there was a nice character in that flashback that I have to say I was really excited to see. And I know that a lot of the other members of the EFR staff were as well. a one Miss Wildfire was in one of the scenes, and as most of you guys know, Wildfire is Sabrina Alberghetti, aka Sibsy's OC. She was in a scene and she had a speaking role, though I don't believe she was voiced by Sabrina herself.
Yeah, I wonder who voiced that role. I'm still curious.
I was so happy to see that, though.
It's certainly not a voice I recognize. The moment she appeared on screen, I instantly knew it was her.
Oh yeah, no, that was great. I was happy to see that they were able to get a shout out to one of the DHX staff as well. You know, they do some shout outs to the fans, but I think that the DHX staff deserves shout outs as well.
Oh, most definitely.
I think this is one self-insert that you can't argue with.
Oh, totally not.
And we also get some foreshadowing. You see her, I guess it's her special ability. She has kind of like a wanted needed spell, but apparently it only works between two ponies and doesn't drive everyone crazy. So she's like the element of love or something. I don't know.
Well, that comes in handy at a
Yep.
wedding, doesn't it?
Want to need a spell. Works every time.
Maybe that's where Twilight learned it and was able to use it on that doll of her smarty pants.
Mhm.
Well, and Cadence gives this evil face that Nash is referred to as the Trixie face, and I gotta agree, when I first saw those evil green flashes or whatever, it really did remind me of Trixie. I didn't think it was going to be Trixie, but it reminded me of her.
It was the same facial expression.
It's one of those moments when she appeared, you can always get the feeling, just based on the background score. This score was done by Anderson, and I think it was brilliant, but you can often tell just based on how grim the music sounds, you can get a feeling as to what's happening or what's going to happen.
Totally.
Another thing we got to see again is Twilight's adorable happy bounce. She's like bouncing around in circles.
Nash, you approve of this, don't you?
Yep.
It was pretty cute.
Well, and so I think the plot point that we're bouncing around is that Princess Cadence, aka Mi Amore Cadenza, has a bit of an evil flair to her, and we get that kind of foreshadowing, like you said. So we go to a series of scenes where we see Twilight inspecting the preparations for the wedding. The first place she goes is to Applejack and what I assume is the Canterlot kitchens of some sort. And Applejack is making some apple fritters. I noticed something I was really happy to spot. I feel proud of myself for spotting this, that actually it's Apple Fritter in the background making apple fritters.
Well, look at that.
I'm really proud of myself for that one.
I did not actually notice that. Nice eye dress.
Yeah.
And just watch when I get corrected on it.
Wait, what color was apple fritter again? I don't remember. Was that green?
Green, main, and I think yellow. But yeah, they're making apple fritters, and it's apple fritter. And then one of my favorite recurring elements of this episode is Spike playing with the two figurines that are supposed to go on top of the cake, just toying with them.
At that point, you can't really question why he doesn't know what a bachelor party is.
Spike likes shipping.
Spike playing with those toys makes me think of the meme face, now kiss.
Yeah.
True.
I instantly thought that too.
And we also see some green magic from Cadence, which is also foreshadowing, because the green magic doesn't really fit her.
That is an awesome color choice, in my opinion. That green just reeks of evil.
Yeah.
It's this weird tinge of brown green that's just, it's almost disgusting in how vibrant it is. I loved it.
When I first saw the green of Cadence's magic, I thought it was Flim or Flam.
I suppose that green is how you know someone is shoddy or something.
It's the magic of the antagonists.
There you go. Well, and come to think of it, in Luna Eclipsed, when Zecora is trying to give that depiction of Nightmare Moon in that whole story, it's a similar green almost, that cloud that she creates. I mean, obviously Zecora isn't evil, but Nightmare Moon is supposed to be evil. There really is that connection, I think, with that kind of sickening green and the idea of evil.
Yep.
Never trust a pony with green magic.
Not at this point. Nope.
I was glad to see Celestia up on her perch looking around for danger using the telescope, because we'd seen that telescope before, but it was never being put to use. I thought that was kind of fun.
You know, it's always the little things like that that make a show like this. They go to, and not any extent, but they go to great lengths to use every little bit, and I like that.
Well, so after we see Celestia using the telescope, and this is, of course, after Twilight has left Applejack and her baking, she heads over to Rarities to see how the dresses are coming along.
This is one of my favorite bits, just because we get to see two ponies that we know and love speak, for once, finally. And that would be Lyra and Colgate.
Now, don't you mean Heartstrings and Romana?
Let's not go there. Okay, let's not, please.
Well, who was the one in the middle?
Clearly one that isn't appreciated enough by this fandom.
Clearly one that multiple fanfics need to be written about.
Yep.
Bust out your shipping charts. There's a new spot that needs to open up,
dear.
right?
Right.
Yeah.
And it's funny because it's pretty much the exact way I imagine their voices to be. Rather unlike Bon Bon's voice, which changes every time. You can never really tell what it's going to be next.
I love Bon Bon for that, though. I really do. I didn't put those in my bag. Oh, I love that. Well, and we get one of my favorite phrases, and I have to say, as soon as the two-parter ended, I went to Twitter like every other nerd, and somebody had already created an account with this name, or at least renamed their account with this name, Princess Demandy Pants. I love it.
Twilight does say some of the cutest little things like that sometimes.
It's like the nemesis of Smarty Pants.
Yeah, I suppose it is. Well, next up on the list of ponies to visit is Pinkie Pie, and we see her bouncing around preparing for the party afterwards. And I like how Cadence, or at least who we assume to be Cadence, tries to insult Pinkie by saying this party would be great if it's for a 6-year-old, and Pinkie takes that with such great pride.
Yeah, I'm not particularly surprised because that's the way most of her parties seem to go.
And I thought it was kind of funny, too, given that this show was originally intended somewhat for that age group.
Yep, makes perfect sense.
Yeah, it just shows that Pinkie's right. If it works for a 6-year-old, it could also work for older people.
It also reaffirms the point that it's really hard to hurt her feelings.
Unless you break a pinky promise, but nobody wants to do that.
You better not.
She'll get you.
Well, up next comes one of my favorite moments in the season. I don't think it's a very big secret that I am a gigantic Luna fan. I love Luna. Luna makes me happy.
You don't say.
And who appears for a one-liner but Luna from the sky? She goes through the force field and lands on the deck and says, rest my sister. As always, I shall guard the night. And I was so happy.
It's funny. Somebody mentioned on Twitter that line could just make her easily the Batmare.
Yeah, she's fairly uptight when it comes to conversation. Sure, she's maybe not screaming in the real Canterlot voice, but still, it's just the way it's presented.
I love Luna. I really do. And you see her shortly later when Twilight's running around and she yells, "Who goes there?" And then sees it's Twilight and goes, "Stay indoors, Twilight Sparkle." Yeah, she still has that kind of royal tone.
It's an overseer. It's like she's overseeing a lot of what's happening and trying to keep everything in order.
I love Luna.
It was a nice touch to get some more Luna, and it does make sense that she would be there.
Yeah, you'd think.
This episode had a lot of everyone. Well, for the most part.
It makes you wonder, though, where was Luna previously? Because she flies in through the barrier?
On the moon.
On the moon.
She just hangs out there casually during the day.
I love the bird that Fluttershy says is out of tune when Twilight is accusing Cadence of being evil to her friends. Fluttershy says, "Well, she did tell one of my birds that he was out of tune," or something like that, and then the bird just starts squawking awfully. That was great.
Why does Fluttershy keep a bird under the table?
I didn't think of that.
Pinkie Pie visit.
Yep.
She put a bird on it.
She put a bird on it.
It's like, oh, jeez. It's a whole reference to basically the boy who cried wolf. You're thinking like Twilight is the boy and she's basically warning everybody, but nobody believes her. And we'll get to how that works out later.
And we see Spike with his shipping again, playing with his toys, and now he's got Pinkie to play with as well.
Pinkie always seems to get herself involved with any kind of nonsense that's going on. It reminded me of Applebuck's season where she starts acting all woozy with Applejack because it looked like fun.
She seems fine to me.
But that's Pinkie all over. She just wants to have fun. Until things get serious, of course. And even then, she still finds time to have fun.
Maris just want to have fun.
And then after that, because basically not even her best friends would believe her, she goes to her brother in an attempt to convince him, but considering the fact that Cadenza, or whoever is there, tries to keep Shining Armor obviously away from Twilight. And that's basically what really is the key to all the suspicion there, because you see how she's basically trying to turn her brother against her, and that just leads to a whole lot of conflict. And then, of course, when a Shining Armor tries to disagree, there enters in the green magic again, and then you really get that grim feeling, because you see how she basically brainwashed Shining Armor, if that's the way you want to go at it.
Yeah, I would think that's a good term for it.
I do like how if Twilight hadn't been nosy and peeked through the door, that It could have been mistaken as a simple, ordinary couple's argument. She wouldn't have seen the green magic, and then she would have been none the wiser, really.
But it didn't work out that way.
Well, it's Twilight. Monitor everything.
Yeah. She gets the feeling herself that she may be being overprotective, and she really cares for her brother. So it's obvious that she would have wanted to be nosy just to make sure everything's all right.
Well, so Twilight runs away from the scene, having seen these evil things, and finds that all of her friends are now dressed up to be the bridesmaids for the wedding. I love how by the end of the scene, Rainbow's already complaining about the fashion choice. Like, this dress won't be aerodynamic. She'll never be satisfied.
Well, you know what they say. Rainbow Dash always dresses in style. Or not in this...
You know what, I think you need to talk to Chain Algorithm about that.
Not in this
No,
generation, at
I
least.
think in this case, it's not a case of her disliking the clothing. It is just, it doesn't look particularly aerodynamic.
Well, she does need to pull off a sonic rainbow, so...
Mm-hmm. It also makes you wonder, they say, we don't know what happened to the old bridesmaids, but we're the new bridesmaids, so we're just gonna do it. Makes you wonder what happened to the old bridesmaids.
Dun dun dun.
Ominous.
Suspicion alert.
Well, Cadence does explain what happened to the old bridesmaids in that they were only interested in chumming up to the equestrian royalty, so she needed to get rid of them.
That's her explanation, at least.
Mm-hmm.
As far as Rainbow Dash goes, I really liked her mane.
You know, I did like in that scene where they're all doing the practice run through of the wedding, and Rarity and Rainbow Dash actually look at each other and giggle. And maybe Rainbow is kind of excited for the wedding after all.
Honestly, I think she just wants to get it done and over with so she can do a sonic rainbow.
Yeah, she was bored in that first scene until they told her that she was going to do the Sonic Rainbow, and then she's
It's
interested.
like, oh yeah,
Well, she takes every opportunity to show off, so...
pretty much.
This final scene, well, I should say final climactic scene of the first episode, kind of reminded me in a lot of ways of those classic scenes you see in romantic comedies or chick flicks or whatever, where it's the wedding, and in this case it was the wedding rehearsal, but you have the person bust in and denounce in this case, the bride. I kind of enjoyed that dynamic. Twilight's going around lobbing accusations.
Only this time somebody didn't ask, does anybody have anything they'd like to say or does not approve of this wedding or something like that? Somebody breaks down the door, says, but that didn't happen, obviously.
Speak now or forever hold your peace.
But that's because it's the practice run through. And
Yep.
they wouldn't need to say that until the real one. I did love when Twilight was throwing out all those accusations that Celestia just pops up in the corner with a really inquisitive look.
Yeah, she kind of took back seat to that scene until afterwards when she gives Twilight that scolding remark and then walks past her.
Though I will say the most scolding thing for Twilight must have been her brother saying, "This event mustn't have been that important to you." That would really cut deep from a family member.
Well, and beyond that, saying you shouldn't show up
Yeah.
at the wedding, I mean.
Especially
Yeah.
that.
Traitors. Traitors, all of them.
And I wanted to get your opinion, Tsyolin, on that minor reprise of the song there. Those few short measures that we get, where Twilight is basically regretting what she had said.
My thoughts on that was, well, first of all, I love a good reprise because not most of the songs in the show don't have reprises. I think actually before this one there was only one I could think of. I think it was Winter Wrap Up. I could be wrong. I don't know.
Art of the Dress.
Art of the Dress. Oh yeah, that's right. Art of the Dress. Thank you. So they're not very common, and I really like that. And also during that sequence, there was that animation with the really old-style cartoony version of Twilight in shining armor. And I was like, hey, that's pretty interesting. You hadn't seen that before. I personally really liked that little sequence.
Yeah.
One thing I particularly liked during that scene was a bit before the reprise, where all the main segs barring Twilight leave to check on Cadence. It feels very reminiscent of episodes 1 and 2 of season 2, where everyone's becoming discorded and only Twilight remains.
Yeah.
They should have learned. Never question Twilight. Twilight is always right.
Yes, but then
Oh,
you
here
get
we go.
episode 3, Lesson 0, where she goes crazy.
Crazy from being so right. No, I'm kidding. It's hard being best pony, come on.
Surely you mean Rainbow Dash, right?
And basically how that all ends up is she regrets everything, and then Cadenza comes in and It does reveal that she truly is evil and sends Twilight down to some crystal caverns or something. And that to me was just like, yeah, boy who cried wolf. Nobody believed him, and in the end, he gets gobbled up. Only in this time, it's different, but the outcome is basically the same.
Well, and so this brings us to the end, the cliffhanger of episode 1, where the clearly evil Princess Miyamare Cadenza conjures a green ring of fire around Twilight and voips her to parts unknown. I thought that was, that scene where you see the fire reflecting in her eyes, just pure evil. You gotta love it. That's Disney grade
Yep.
evil right
She's
there.
an evil enchantress.
And she does evil dances, apparently.
I don't think she put Twilight into a trance, though. She got past it. But, this is at least the one advantage of having to wait an extra week for the 2 episodes, in that we didn't have to wait very long for the resolution to this episode. Can you imagine a week between these episodes? That would have been torture.
It would drive you insane. And then we go and remind everyone the gap between season 2 and 3.
We're not talking about that right now.
That was some really
Go ahead.
dark stuff they pulled.
Yeah, it really was. You don't know where they took Twilight.
Yeah. It's just all the fans will be languishing in agony, like, what happened to Twilight? Is she dead or something?
Luckily, the cliffhanger didn't really last that long, as the next episode was immediately afterwards, rather than a whole week. If it was a whole week, just imagine how different, how everyone would have been feeling if there was a week between the first and second part.
I get the feeling people would write fanfics just to get
They
through
would
that week.
write fanfics about what happened.
Just speculation.
Just to predict what happened.
Yeah, just to feel some form of resolution.
They'd all be
or something.
grimdark.
Oh, damn.
Like she got sent to the pits of hell or something like that.
Tartarus.
Yeah.
Yeah, there you go. Well, let's dive right into part 2 then, where we find, after a quick recap of part 1, we find Twilight in a cavernous room full of crystals. And I really like the scene that follows here, where you see Cadenza, who still hasn't really been revealed as the true nature of who the villain is. You see the reflections of her all over the different crystal faces. It reminded me of a scene from the episode of Batman the Animated Series with Baby Doll, where she's looking in the mirrors, or in the movie Enter the Dragon, where Bruce Lee's character is trying to catch the bad guy and has to shatter a bunch of glass in order to find him. It was a classic movie. I guess you could call it a cliche, but it was really, really fun to see.
Cliches like that they're fine.
Now, when we see Twilight in these caverns, this is one of the scenes where the animation really shines. Like, literally. You see Twilight's horn, the effects coming from that, the shadowing, it was just perfect.
Yeah, the Hall of Mirrors, I was reminded of. There's this one Bond movie, I think it's The Man with the Golden Gun, or I can't recall quite, but there's this bunch of mirrors, and you have to figure out which one is the real one. It just reminded me of that kind of scene, which it has been used in different movies and series.
I think you're right, it is The Man with the Golden Gun. Christopher Lee is the bad guy, you gotta love that.
Yep.
One thing I liked is that Twilight casts magic missile.
Oh, that's good. That's gotta be lethal, man.
She casts it at the darkness, even.
Oh dear.
Well, so Twilight fires about, nearly hitting herself a few times, and finally crashes through some of the crystals and finds, dun dun dun, a cadence behind one of the walls. And after confirming that it is actually the real Cadence through her little song and dance from when Cadence was her full sitter.
Sunshine, sunshine, ladybugs awake. Clap your hooves and do a little shake. You remember me.
They proceed to escape.
While bursting into song. In a true Disney-esque fashion. Good split between a villainous side of the song and a good side of the song.
Which was great. I thought that was a really, really cool twist on it.
Oh yeah, me too. I loved it.
I absolutely love that song, and I remember I was watching it, and at the same time was chatting with a few other Brony musicians, and we were all just exploding over it. They were like, Disney-esque villain song? Are you kidding me? This is amazing. It was really fantastic. We all loved it. It was just a really good song.
I was expecting another flashback, because they zoom in on Cadence's eyes, and I was expecting seeing more of that Philly Twilight and Cadence, but that didn't happen.
Also, one thing I noticed during that song, that the evil Cadence has the same room as Rarity in Sweet and Elite. At least it looks very similar.
Oh, that's right. I didn't even pay attention to that. That's true.
I actually think I noticed that too. I wasn't sure if it was an exact copy, but it sure looks the same.
Well, who knows? They may have similar rooms, like at a hotel. Who knows?
Hotel Canterlot.
Living it up at the... No, I'm not going there.
I just wonder, how do you think Spike would have reacted to those crystal caverns? I mean, he'd look around and just see a smorgasbord.
Crystals, gems, they're not the same thing, So, I don't know how he would react to that.
Well, Spike eats baked bats, so he's not very choosy.
Yeah, I guess so.
Well, and we get a nice little reference to Temple of Doom. They jump into a minecart and go careening away.
That particular style you see a lot of times where it's a minecart, only the track is so ridiculously twisted, it's like a roller coaster almost, and you're just like, why would anyone want to build a track that way?
It's like a Donkey Kong Country level.
Yeah, oh yeah, like that. That works perfectly.
Well, and so they come to the exit to the caves, apparently, given that there's some light there. They VoIP to it, really. Twilight pulls that spell again, and they're blocked ominously by Lyra, Colgate, and the unknown third bridesmaid, who are all clearly under Cadence's, or the evil Cadenza's spell.
Zombie ponies.
Yep. You get just the essence of the green eyes, just, definitely says something.
Then you go to a commercial break, and when we come back, we see the wedding in full swing, and Twilight busts in, and right at the last second says, "Stop the wedding," and the villain is revealed. Now, to go into a little bit more detail into this villain and the villain's background, we have a special surprise guest reviewer, one Mr. Fullpapers. Welcome.
Hello, thanks for having me.
Well, and so you did a bit of research about the changelings, about this villain and her minions, and I wanted to know what you found about kind of the archetypes and the mythological references that we've seen here as a resident Brony scholar.
Well, there is a ton going on in this episode, and just beginning with the changelings, Cadenza actually explains it quite well when she's faced with her double and says she's a changeling. She takes the form of some pony you love and gains power by feeding off your love for them. That's actually pretty close to what a changeling was in traditional mythology and folk tales in Europe and Scandinavia. Traditionally, it's a fairy child that's been substituted for a human one for any number of reasons.
So can you go a little bit further into detail about what changelings are from a human mythological standpoint? Like, how do they operate?
There are a couple of reasons why there are changelings and why the fairies want to replace a human child with one of their own, and two specifically connect with this episode. The first one is a little bit tangential, but usually for political purposes. The fairies want to take over a kingdom, so what do? They replace the child of the king and queen with one of their own who will grow up to be kind of a Manchurian candidate, if you like. The second reason connects more with this episode. Oftentimes in the folk tales, a changeling will be introduced so that it can feed off the life force of the parents who take it as one of their own children, and then become food for the rest of the fairies, which parallels what's going on in this episode with the changeling feeding off the love of the ponies.
Were there any other mythological references you caught in this episode? I mean, one thing that I thought of when I saw those, mines were dwarves per se, but I mean, especially with the villains, were there any other kind of nods to mythological or archetypal analogs?
Well, you've got another allusion with Queen Chrysalis, who took the form of Credenza. Thematically, the episode is all about change and metamorphosis, and this name Chrysalis, referring to that middle stage when a larva is becoming a butterfly, very much ties in with that.
Well, and you hear in the episode, especially when we start seeing the minions, the different changeling minions, they use a lot of insect noises and kind of insect buzzy sounds, so it kind of plays into that. And of course, too, we see Queen Chrysalis imprison Celestia in a chrysalis.
And the visual depiction of the changelings as these dark, shadowy creatures with no real definition of their own also ties in with that theme of change and metamorphosis, dealing with Jungian archetypes and the idea of the shadow. It's a common trope in mythology and in coming-of-age stories wherein you have to face your own dark side in order to progress in your own evolution as a person.
Well, that reminds me a lot of the first of the Earthsea books, where the main character has to face off against his own shadow. I wanted to ask what you thought maybe that the holes in the characters, the physical holes in there, what that kind of represented, or did you think that kind of played into that same imagery?
I think it plays into that same sort of imagery, the lack of substance without taking on the appearance of another creature, and again tying in with that idea of needing to confront the shadow in order to change and evolve. And the whole episode is very much about change and evolution. Cadenza and Shining Armor changing and becoming one in the union of marriage. It's in the closing song, the lyrics, the two hearts becoming one. Well, Cadenza has to come face to face with her shadow in order to have this happily ever after moment.
Well, and I wanted to ask you one last question about the changelings, which is, in this episode, as you've kind of alluded to, they use the power of love in a Huey Lewis sort of way, I suppose, to defeat the changelings. In mythology or in, a medieval fairy tale, how would the king or queen be rid of the changeling? Or I suppose, in a sense, this almost comes off as a bit of a succubus, too.
There are a lot of similarities there, yeah. And to answer your question, what would a king or queen do? There are various rituals and involving all sorts of arcane spells to protect your child from being taken. So there's not a whole lot you can do if you receive a changeling, but you can prevent yourself from being the victim of one.
So what you're saying is that, once again, Equestria might just be a better place to live.
I think so too.
Than the human.
I'd agree with that.
All right, well, thank you, Full Papers. All right, so getting back to Queen Chrysalis, the Changeling, we get the big face-off, and we get what I thought was one of the most dramatic moments in either season, when Celestia decides to use all of her power to defend Equestria from the changelings and goes face to face, or horn to horn as it were, with the queen, and fails. I was blown away by that. There goes her crown and she's falling down.
See, I've always maintained the notion that every great character has a flaw or a weakness. It's nice to finally see that Celestia has hers. As much as it's a bad outcome for Equestria, yeah, I'm happy with this.
Well, and Nicole Oliver, when we spoke to her, made a big point of saying that she really enjoyed how Celestia as a character did have a vulnerability or did have flaws, especially when she was talking about the Discord episode. So I really felt like this episode kind of highlighted that as well and made her a much more, well, in a sense, believable character.
I'm surprised they did that, because it's Princess Celestia. It's like supposed to be like all the little kids' favorite, and it's like she's dying or something.
Well, she does kind of very quickly say, I'm all right, go get the elements of harmony. And then again, that's another moment where you get thrown a curveball. I figured they were going to go and get the elements of harmony, and that would be, the end of these changelings. Well, no, that's not what happens at all.
But we're getting ahead of ourselves, aren't we? Yeah, and I'd just like to point out that during the Chrysalis Cadence face-off, you see Derpy in the background, and her eyes are completely derpy. Another thing is that, bronies, they tend to have this motto of love and tolerance, and changelings feed on love, so what does that make them, like the anti-bronies or something?
I thought that bronies called trolls parasprites. Maybe they should just be calling them changelings.
That looks like the parasprites just got one-upped.
Well, trolls tend to like when you rage at them, so this might be some weird kind of troll that likes it when you're nice to them.
Can you imagine a face-off between parasprites and changelings? The changelings would turn into parasprites, and the parasprites would just multiply. I mean, it would just be an endless process.
I don't know. I don't think I want to think about it.
It's a nightmare.
It's like dividing by zero.
Oh no, then we definitely can't discuss that.
That's impossible. Well, and then we get to another one of my favorite scenes in the episode where the main six face off against their clones, and man, those ponies know how to kick some butt.
I actually mentioned on the Twitter that it's basically fighting is magic in the show.
I think my favorite part of that was the fact that basically Pinkie Pie's Twilight is a laser cannon of some sorts. That was quite hilarious.
And there was also Pinkie Pie pulling out the party cannon as a weapon.
I love that.
One thing I liked is that they throw off their wedding dresses to go and get the elements of harmony, and Rarity just stays behind to pick them all up. It's like, no, my beautiful dresses.
You know, in that scene, it was nice to see they didn't have a "don't shoot me, I'm the real one." No, I'm the real one. They did have a minor bit with Applejack saying, "I am the real one," but it's not like they had this standoff moment that you see in shows and movies that have the clone issue.
I like how Pinkie Pie just challenges the one that's in front of her. No, do me. And it does like a perfect clone of her, and she goes, I've seen better. Where?
In the mirror.
I guess. Maybe in one of the dimensions she flies between.
Or when she sang the Smile song and cloned herself.
I guess. It's Pinkie Pie. We don't ask questions, do we?
And something I was thinking when I saw the changelings is they look like the zombie ponies from Story of the Blanks.
I was thinking that too. They kind of had that similar look, but maybe, it's that same kind of evil aura about them.
Though they are more insectoid.
Yeah, they really did come off as some sort of locust swarm.
Mm-hmm.
Well, they fail to get the elements of harmony, and they end up going back to the main throne room for a final standoff with Chrysalis. And again, this is another scene that just really played into the overall Disney feel of this episode.
See, Chrysalis fell into the typical villain trap of leaving the main characters unbound and just free to do what they want as she gloats. And it's like, no!
Like, there's no way you could stop me now. Ha ha ha.
Yeah, and she starts singing again.
Oh yeah, and that's where another reprise comes in. Not just one, but two. The whole villain song, and she only does about 2 lines, I think, but it's still quite nice.
And all of Canterlot is being destroyed.
Yeah, it makes you wonder. This is a show for little girls, you know?
It also makes you wonder, where's Luna?
I don't know.
I'm sure that certain editors of certain fanfics may consider writing fanfics themselves about that story.
Probably.
Certain people who might be in on this review right now, who knows?
And during that scene, we see Carrot Top and Dr. Hooves, and they're in an alley protecting a filly. So I'm just wondering if that's going to be the new Fanon shipping.
Apparently, Derpy gets left behind, and the new companion of the Doctor is Carrot Top.
Well, she had to get another role after her role in Con Maine as one of Pony Joe's, fillies.
Ooh.
So maybe her casting agent, landed her that role. Well, and so, again, like I mentioned before, the power of love triumphs over all. Crescendo, you wanted to make a joke out of that.
I can't believe he stole my joke!
Well, you know what? It's okay. It might just be cruel sometimes. But they say that all in love is fair, but you don't care.
Oh dear.
Another thing about this part that I absolutely loved was just, the background score itself for this part. It was fairly cliche, but it was perfect, and I'm just thinking, Anderson, you god, that was amazing. It just really, how expressive it was, it really just gave a whole feel for the scene, and I absolutely loved it.
See, everyone that worked on this show, this episode was just fantastic. The writing was amazing, the animation, Ingram and Anderson, just bravo.
Shock of shocks, this episode was written by the author of 2 of my favorite episodes, Party of One and Lesson Zero. This was written by Megan McCarthy. Another triumph on her part, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and again, yeah, Will Anderson and Ingram both did great. Well, we're coming up on the major climax, again, the power of love overcomes all. They use their combined powers to evict all of the changelings off into some loveless desert or something, who knows. And then we get the real wedding planning and a quick montage of, scenes with Twilight and her checklist.
I really like the posing at the beginning of that magic love bubble, or wherever they were standing together. It was really nice. And you have to wonder, because Shining Armor has been keeping that bubble up, and he's been displaying a lot of magic power, so just wonder, is magic ability something that runs in the family?
Apparently.
Must be. After the montage of preparations, we finally get to see the very truncated wedding scene itself, and they go out to the porch in a very Kate and William-esque scene, and wave to the crowds, and then we get dun 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 canonized shipping.
Mm-hmm.
They smooch. Well, you know what? It had to happen.
Well, they couldn't have had a wedding without it, you know?
Exactly. And then we get this nice after party scene and some of the best music of the season. I was really impressed by the track that DJ Vinyl Scratch starts playing.
Yep.
Or at least I assume that's what it is.
Speaking of a certain Vinyl Scratch, we finally get to see her eye color.
We do indeed. How did you guys react to the eye color change? I mean, the fanon had been that her eyes were going to be red. This is more of a magenta maroon. What did you guys think?
I was quite happy that it actually, didn't go with the fan, because that might actually give the community the feeling like, oh, if they've done Derpy and Vinyl Scratch like the way we wanted it, maybe they'll do everybody the way we wanted it. And that's obviously that not to be true, with their eyes not being blood red, which I'm sure plenty of people will be upset about with all the Vinyl Scratch art that has red eyes. But in the long run, I think it was a good move.
Smash all the fan and
See, I like it because it shows that they wanted to show us the eye color, something the fandom wanted, but it shows that DHX are still doing their own thing, not completely submitting to the fandom.
From my perspective, I was actually, I was fine with the eye color. I liked the look of the red, but it's like you guys said, if DHX did everything the fans expected of them, the fans would feel, I think, too entitled. And, the color worked. It fit her, and we got to see it. So I was happy about that. Plus, she's rocking out. I mean, animation's away.
I do love how Pinkie Pie just pulls her out of nowhere.
Vinyl Scratch hammer space.
I like the way how differentiated, because this is the part where the song comes in. I like how different all the songs were. Like the very first song was more typical Daniel Ingram-esque, like you would hear in Giggle at the Ghostly or Cheerily Sweet and Kind song. I forget the name of that song, but the second one is a whole Disney-esque villain song, and we're like, whoa, we've never heard this before. And then the last song is very poppy. It's like the only song you could compare it to is Equestria Girls, and that's not even an official song. So it's totally different, but it sounded really nice.
Yeah.
It seems to me, and correct me if I'm wrong on this, Tsyolin, it seems to me that the music in this episode is ripe for the remixing.
Oh, like you wouldn't believe.
You hear that, musicians? Get on it. We've got a dry season coming up.
They're already on it, trust me.
One thing I noticed about the wedding is their rings are put on their horns. So does that mean if non-unicorns get married, or are they not allowed to get married?
We don't worry about such things.
Now, I'm guessing there's some sort of like a bracelet or something. They wouldn't allow just unicorns to get married. After all, how would they have Earth ponies and Pegasi?
They could have had rings on the horns just because it was a very special occasion or very royal thing, because obviously before you didn't see any unicorns, married or not, with rings on the horns. Like Mrs. Cake, for example, didn't have a ring on her horn, obviously.
We know pony genetics makes no sense from the Baby Cakes episode, so...
Besides, Taylor, Mrs. Cake is an Earth pony.
Oh, wait, I thought she was... Oh, no, dang it, I got the wrong one. I'm sorry.
We don't worry about such things.
Ignore.
Well, and I've got to mention this too before I forget it. Luna appears out of nowhere and just kind of swoops down and says,
Hello, every pony. Did I miss anything?
and, it's Luna, so I'm happy every time she appears.
Well, another thing I liked was Pinky's dance, and they're doing the preparations. And they're on their back hooves doing some sort of chicken dance. It was like Pinky is a chicken again.
And Cadence was completely following along.
Yeah, it was nice to see the contrast between the evil Chrysalis disguised as Cadence and then how Cadence would actually respond. And she responds wholeheartedly, joining in with Pinky.
Well, and we get to see Twilight's parents really quickly during the actual wedding itself as well, so at least they kept that continuity.
It would be really weird for Shining Armor to have a wedding and his parents not be present.
Yep.
Well, and before the episode ends, Spike refers to the bachelor party again that's about to happen. Yeah, that was funny.
Poor Spike.
Yep.
Doesn't understand.
another one of those last little details that I liked right as the episode was ending when Cadence tossed the flowers to the bridesmaid and Rarity's all like, mine! You know, just like from when she was discorded, and there was a few frames of her face with that really grim look with her teeth clenched together, like you saw
A crazy Twilight face.
with crazy Twilight, you know.
Biological clock is ticking.
Oh, Lord. One thing I want to talk about before we get to our actual rating of the episode itself was something that was unique to this episode and that was really promoted by the Hub in advance, and that was that Tori Spelling was doing the in-betweens during the commercials, where she actually interacted and semi-interviewed the different ponies using a green screen. I wanted to know what you guys, as bronies, what your reactions to that were.
Oh dear.
Yeah, I agree with Nash here. It was a good idea. I just think it felt misplaced, if you get what I mean. I mean, it's the human in Equestria thing. Something about it doesn't feel right to me.
Yeah.
It made me think like they're trying to cross over something to Blue's Clues, like with Steve talking to all the cartoon animals, where in this case it's Tori talking to cartoon ponies, and it doesn't really work that way when that's not what the show's about in the long run.
When I saw it, I was trying to understand what the motivation behind it was, and I'd like to think that the reason they did that, they had all this promotion, was that they were trying to test the waters for the market. I mean, I got the sense that they were trying to see what a slightly older than demographic market would like. I mean, this was not something that was intended for 4-year-old girls. This is something that was intended for, again, maybe a teenage audience. That being said, it really obviously was contrived. I mean, it was interesting to hear that they had, original dialogue. I was afraid they were just going to use clips from older shows. But in the end, when I'm watching the episode in the future, because I know I will, am I going to watch those in-betweens? Probably not. And am I going to be seeing them in the fan recordings or in the official iTunes recordings? I don't think so. So it was something different, and I thought it was worth mentioning, but I didn't think it was anything that really added to the episode. But that being said, it didn't detract from watching it.
It's not canon.
Definitely agreed.
It's not canon. Okay, so Crescendo, you had a good idea for how we should rate this.
I believe we should rate this out of bouquets thrown. 1 to 5 bouquets thrown.
So, Tsyolin, out of 5 bouquets thrown, how many would you give this episode?
Well, based on the music, because I'm a musician and I care most about the musical content, but I love the show itself and the animation as well. I thought the animation of the episode was brilliant. I thought the storyline was good. It wasn't amazing, but it was pretty dang good. The music, Ingram's songs were fantastic. Anderson's score was fantastic. Easily my favorite episodes in the series so far, so I'd have to give it a 5, honestly.
All right, and Nash, what did you think out of 5 tossed bouquets?
Well, I'm not going to list all the things I thought was great about it because that will be a long list. It's pretty much everything. So I'm just going to say to give it 5 thrown bouquets to distract zombie bridesmaids.
And Crescendo, how many zombie bridesmaids could you distract in terms of bouquets?
Oh, I'm sure I could distract more than 5, but we're limiting ourselves here. I'll have to give it a 5. This has been by far the best episode we've seen so far. And again, like Nash, I'm not going to list off everything I liked because it really was everything. All I've got to say is I'm looking forward to season 3.
Hey, for good measure, Full Papers, what's your rating of this episode?
I would give it 5 bouquets, I think. I think it was some strong writing and just good performances all around. Had a lot going for it. Definitely a 5. Very entertaining.
So, how about you, Draft?
I've got one word that I think sums up my reaction to this episode that really should define for most regular listeners of Everfree Radio.
Does it begin with a W?
It might. And it might end in an una. I loved this episode. You know, we had heard rumblings. Sibsy in her interview a couple weeks ago had said that, this was her favorite episode to work on. We had known that this was going to be something. And so I had high expectations. And they were met. I enjoyed basically everything in this episode. There was never a moment in either of the two parts of it where I felt like they were doing something wrong. And that's rare. That's something that, I'm an extremely critical person. And if I'm seeing something where I didn't feel like there was something wrong, that means that they're doing everything right. It means that they really, really, really worked hard on it. I love that Luna was in it. I loved the music. I loved the animation. I love the villain even. I mean, 5. Wholehearted 5. So I think this is our first perfect review of an episode, isn't it?
I believe it is.
Just goes to show how amazing this episode was.
Well, so there you've heard it. A unanimous 5 out of 5 for 5 reviewers. It's the 5s have been
Quintuple.
So, guys, what are we gonna do now? The summer's coming up here. What are we gonna do without new episodes of Pony?
We're out of Pony.
Well, this calls for the fans, the people that create content. It's time for them to get really creative, especially people like me. I definitely have plans to keep going with my music. I got plans for several remixes and works and pieces that I need to get done. I'm not going to rush them because I have a whole summer full of no episodes to kill. So hopefully it'll be a really creative dry season.
And don't worry, because there's plenty more where we've came from too.
Yes, indeed, actually. There's an entire season of episodes that Everfree Radio never reviewed. The long lost Season 1. So, to all of you Everfree Radio fans out there, stay tuned this summer as we review Season 1 and Return of Harmony, the first 2 episodes of this season. And stay tuned to Everfree Radio for all sorts of live events, all sorts of music premieres, all sorts of live streaming of the various conventions this summer. We're going to have quite a bit to show you, so stay tuned. Once again, this has been Final Draft.
I've been Crescendo.
And I'm Nash.
And I want to thank Tsyolin and Full Papers for coming in and helping to guest review this episode. Thanks, guys.
Not a problem.
Cheers.
And stay tuned to everfreeradio.com.